All right, now you can start.
Okay. The Building Advisory Committee will come to order on the 6th day of August, 2025. I'm going to remind everybody who's here, if you would, as we're conversing in this meeting hall, please speak loudly and distinctly so the folks who are watching from home or when this is recorded for streaming on a later date or review at a later date, people can hear what is being said in a clear and concise manner. Hey, Dave. Okay, first order of business is public comment. Wendy, is there any public comment? No
Nope.
public comment. There being no public comment, we'll move right on to item number 3, the approval of the 7/16/25 meeting minutes. Do we have those minutes, Wendy? Okay, and they were passed around, aside from 2 spelling mistakes.
The names spelling, yeah,
Okay,
which we fixed.
Those minutes are ready for acceptance. Do I start with a motion? Start with a motion, right? Motion to accept the meeting minutes from the July 16th meeting.
Second.
Any discussion?
I'm gonna abstain since I was not here.
Very good.
I'm gonna abstain as well.
Okay. There being no discussion, I have a motion. Okay, here, all in favor of accepting the meeting minutes from July 16th? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And 2 abstentions. That motion passes. Thank you very much. To the meat of the meeting, number 4, we're going to start with an update put together by our owner's project manager, the Peregrine Group. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Erica Schechter.
Yes, thank you.
Fire away, Erica.
Thank you, Chair. For those who I haven't met yet, my name is Erica Schechter. I'm a project manager with Peregrine Group. Thank you for having us this evening. I am joined by Sam Bradner, my colleague, and Matt Abraham as well. So what we wanted to do at least give you an update on where we stand with both the Wickford Middle School projects and the capital improvement projects, and then turn it over to the design teams to give a more comprehensive update on those 2 areas. So in terms of the stage 2, what we've been doing as a team has been meeting with RIDE on an ongoing bi-weekly basis. And these check-ins are really important as we advance to the September 15th submission date. So we're going before RIDE, we're meeting at a bi-weekly basis and giving them an update on progress to date. So really we can gut check all the work that's being done and get their feedback in real time. In addition, the team has previewed the plans for Wickford Middle School and the CIP prioritization strategy that you'll hear from in a little bit. We have also started to bring on the commissioning agent through an RFP process. This would be required through the RIDE Stage 2. The request for proposals was posted on July 24th, and the addendum 1 was issued Friday, August 1st. We are anticipating a submission from commissioning agents on August 15th that the group will then review proposals and make a recommendation to award. In addition, we are working through the environmental coordination. So Vortex has been approved by the school committee for building material testing, and we are working with them now directly to schedule the destructive testing on the existing buildings to identify asbestos-containing material. That information is going to go into the cost estimate and ultimately into any design documents to understand where asbestos is so we can have appropriate abatement plans as we begin construction. That activity in terms of the destructive testing is expected to begin the week of August 11th. We're still coordinating with Vortex to make sure that they can schedule their roofer for that work though. In addition, I think last time we met, we had discussed the ESA, which is the Environmental Site Assessment Phase 2 for the Wickford Middle School. That we have kind of continued to understand the procurement of PAR, who completed the Phase 1, and working with Perkins Eastman they have been able to retain them to continue the work through, phase 2, so that is being coordinated in the background as well. Moving down to project team coordination. So one of the key topics that has come up as we've been working through both the Wickford Middle School and the CIP projects, and was actually raised by RIDE too, is making sure that there's parity between Davisville Middle School and the Wickford Middle School. So both architecture teams have already met to have preliminary conversations about ensuring parity as they move forward with design. Everything from making sure that plans, as you're looking at them, are color coordinated accordingly so that it's easier to read as you're looking at kind of the two schools, to making sure that the IT is in coordination and that any type of meetings that we're having with the district are being coordinated with both Perkins Eastman and DBVW. In addition, we're looking at lockers too, to make sure that there's parity between the both schools in terms of the number of lockers for students, among other things. But these conversations are going to be ongoing as we continue to advance the design for both schools. On July 29th, last Tuesday, we also held what we refer to as a card trick meeting with the design teams and the North Kingstown School District. That is a master scheduling exercise to talk through everything from how do we get to September 15th, which is just around the corner, so that we have that addendum for submission ready to go and ready to submit on that date, to looking at the project more holistically. So how do we advance once we have that September 15th date past us? How do we advance to the next stages in the approval process for RIDE to bring us all through construction? So from that, what we'll do with that master scheduling exercise, we will then take and build a schedule that we can kind of keep referring back to. But what I will say is this is a very collaborative approach, and I think it brings all the stakeholders to the table and really to understand kind of all these approval processes that need to take place along the way. Everything from cost estimates, for example, to bringing it before this committee for approval, to the school committee for approval before we finally submit through RIDE's necessity of school construction process. So actually, if we jump down to the Wickford Middle School now, what you can see is kind of a high-level outcome of this card trick too. So we've developed these dates in order to get us to that September 15th. And you'll see too with the CIP projects that we're aligning these dates as well. So we have a design package that Perkins Eastman is working on right now, getting that to the cost estimator August 8th. We will then, our goal is to come before this committee with a final package that includes the cost estimate, includes design plans, and includes what we'll be submitting to RIDE on September 8th, and then going before the school committee on September 9th, with ultimately that submission to RIDE on September 15th. We intend and anticipate that there will be other meetings prior to those dates, but those are kind of the key timelines that we need to meet in order to get to that September 15th deadline. We also will need to have a pre-submission meeting with RIDE too, so although we're meeting informally right now, we will be required to meet with them, and we'll build that into the timeline. Moving down to the capital improvement projects, so the DBVW team, I will say, has been moving at lightning speed to get us to that September 15th submission. There was a walkthrough that was held on July 21st at Davis Middle School, and that was more or less a result of the last time this committee met. We were given direction to kind of look at the high school roof, which is a priority, looking at parity between Davisville Middle School and Wickford Middle School, and then looking to stabilize the elementary school. So a more in-depth look was taken at the Davisville Middle School, and the team will be updating you momentarily on the CIP list, but they've begun to develop that prioritized list to see how we can best and most efficiently utilize the funding available to make strategic impacts in the district. I will not, we've already reviewed the timeline, but similar timeline, similar cadence to what we are doing for the Wickford Middle School as well. Just moving down to financials, we do have a monthly purchasing update, and that is that both the Perkins Eastman contract, the DBVW contract, and Vortex contract went before the school committee on July 31st, and those were approved. They will then go to town council for final approval.
I can give you an update on
Yes.
that. So the Perkins Eastman contract and DBVW does not need to go to town council because they already approved prior.
Okay,
They just need, both contracts just have to get signed by Ralph and myself.
thank you,
The
Superintendent.
Vortex contract will go, I sent that off earlier to the town clerk.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we know when their meeting is, Ken?
That's next week.
Next week, okay.
Sorry, I don't, it's,
Sorry.
Monday's a holiday, so it might be Tuesday. I can.
August 18th is the next one.
So there's actually 2 weeks, it's not next week, it's the week after.
Yeah, and I think just to echo one thing that Erica said, on both of the schedules that we outlined, we expect that there might be special meetings with this group again, maybe even school committee, we're not sure, but, you know, we wanna make sure that the folks around the table here and even in the school committee have the full transparency, and we're trying to do it in a proper order, to make sure that building advisory committee sees things first, and then we go before school committee. So I think to Erica's point, we have the major, kind of objectives here with those critical path dates, but we may also be inserting others, and they may come up relatively quickly. So we're hopeful that this group is flexible, understanding we're at the end of summer, which is a hard time, but also we're trying to kind of get to this submission date on the 15th. So we'll work collectively with the district and our kind of working group that we meet with weekly to ensure that, A, we're being respectful of everybody's calendars, but then also ensuring that we can kind of get to that submission date on the 15th.
Thank you very much. So thank you for the OPM update. Specifically, we wanna move forward with a, update from our architect and engineering firm, Perkins Eastman? Let's go with Perkins first. Got it right there, okay.
You got them both, so.
Yeah, we did. This will be an update on the Wickford Middle School project as it exists right now, so,
Right.
Mark, fire away.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Mark McCarthy with Perkins Eastman Architects. So I'll be relatively brief, and I think Erica did a good job of kind of summarizing where we're at. And I'm not sure who's controlling the slide, so we can go to the next slide. So this is just, so most of our effort over the summer has been really getting all our engineers and the rest of the team up to speed. As we talked about, given the September date, we actually need to get drawings to the cost estimator at the end of this week to give time for that to happen, for a detailed cost estimate, and time for us to get back as a team and work through that and make sure that we get that all right. So this is just the other consultants on our team that have been involved. It's actually not the full team yet. There's other consultants that will join in after this stage 2, but particularly with the MEP engineers and structural engineers, and we've been working lightning fast, but also carefully to, the kind of the goal here is to get as much information in that set of drawings. I mean, there's kind of twofold, right? One for RIDE and for all their concerns, but also in the cost estimate, the more we get in there, the more information, the more accurate that cost estimate's gonna be. So I believe that Tina was here and had presented this. If you recall, at the, in the spring, we had made a lot of effort to compact the building and to look for some cost savings there. One of the things we've done since then is rotate the building. That has to do with solar orientation. We'd much rather have classroom windows being facing north and south than east and west, you know, for glare and much better building envelope. So we've done that and then started to look at the impact on the site, which is something we didn't have enough time to do in the spring. So if we go to the next slide. So here's a more developed site plan where we are to date with, as I said, working with our civil engineers and with our landscape architect. A couple of the highlights of it are, we've eliminated we had another curb cut that was closer to the intersection. Sorry, the name of the street escapes me at the moment.
Howard Hill Road?
Tower Hill Road, sorry, which was always a concern because of the traffic backs up there, and that curb cut was a little close to the intersection. So we're able to reduce that. We are looking at actually not encroaching on the existing softball field. That was a good thing because we're obviously looking for savings, looking for saving on scope of the project, but part of the compacting and reducing of the building footprint, we were able to keep that in place and not have to replace the softball field. So that's proving to be a good thing so far. And looking at, you can see there's still the yellow is a separate bus loop, and then the blue with the cars. That's something that we'll be doing as soon as school starts, is start to look a little bit more in detail at the traffic. But we feel we have a pretty good start here.
Hey, Mark, question for
Yeah,
you there.
absolutely.
Maybe Sam, you can advise as well. Will a softball field be open construction space for supplies, construction trailers, things of that nature? Or will it be off limits for the construction from beginning to end?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it would be nice if it was off limits. I suspect it'll probably have to be used for some
Okay.
lay down or something like
So there
that.
might be some minor repairs involved if it does happen to be.
Right, and if we can
encapsulated.
avoid the infield, that's great,
I-
right?
I-
We recrown the outfield and reseed sorry.
Kind of truth be told, if that was being used, I don't think it's the worst thing, because that entire field needs to be reconstructed anyway, drainage wise.
Mhm.
It's in rough condition.
Mhm.
So even if it wasn't being used, it would still need to be updated, so.
Okay,
Yeah, and I think the question would be is is that a project scope, or is that something that the
An add-on.
recreation department, or is an add-on that we can have in the, can it be designed, but, kind of a relief valve on pricing, and until we get into past this first stage and into the future stages of design, we can kind of figure out whether not if it's in the design scope, but whether it's in the actual construction scope, or is it a thing that happens later on in the process. I think we'd certainly like to lead with don't touch the area, don't use it for staging, Chris, back to your question. I think it's probably a little early for us to think through kind of how you would cycle through that site, while also making sure that we have a hard line between operating building, to the east, and the construction site to the west. So I think all those things are gonna come to play as we start to develop that site plan and think about the logistics of that construction process.
Thank you. Excellent.
sure.
The only other thing I'll add is I think the removal of that potential entrance on the hill, I think in a lot of ways, good for a lot of reasons. We knew that RIDOT was going to have an issue with that, given the proximity to the intersection that's just to the south. I also think, in some ways, having just two controlled entrances might be a better thing from a management standpoint for the district. Obviously, relief valves aren't terrible, but I think just from a general, how the traffic moves through the property, isolating the bus traffic to one entrance, isolating the drop-off parents, staff to the other one, are good ways to kind of think about the circulation on the site. Obviously, it needs more development before we get to a final point.
Right, yeah, I think we're trying to maintain that separation so we don't have those conflicts of cars and buses. So far, so good. This is a floor plan, you've probably seen this before. I think the most important thing to talk about here is that we've maintained the program, we've talked and we've worked with school leadership about the middle school and teaming approach. Roughly speaking, as you look at this, and it's more or less sixth grade on the second floor, seventh and eighth grade teams on the third floor, administrative and arts, and the gym and the cafeteria on the ground floor. So it's very logical, and I think it breaks out pretty well so far. We were able to, there was a couple of things that we were looking to resolve, which we were able to do. One is we added a science lab just in terms of the teaming, it was, we were one short on that, so we did add that, as well as we kind of made an L of the building that allowed us to get the music, which is kind of the yellow boxes there, right there, where the cursor is, just next to the gym, get those music classrooms out from underneath the general classrooms. We can do things to separate noise, but it's difficult to do with band rooms. So that was a good development of the plan. And these are just technical drawings. Honestly, I think they're here just to remind everyone of all the work that goes into these things behind the scenes. I get to stand up here and show you a nice color picture, and there's lots and lots of people working to make this all, develop plans that somebody can actually build. So this is what we've been working hard on, ceiling plans, all the details that go into it. As I said, the more we can get in there, the better the cost estimate will be, the better shape we'll be in going forward. So.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, that going back to the timing, we know that these guys are gonna push the button on Friday to send this over to the cost estimator. While that color-coded plan is important to understand kind of how the programming is working, the detailed plans that you see here, and there's a lot more behind these, are gonna be the things that the cost estimator can actually dig into to build a full exhaustive cost estimate for all the trades that are gonna come into the process, from architecture all the way through to plumbing, mechanical, electrical. So these docs, along with narratives, are gonna be the things that get handed over, and also are gonna be the beginnings of what that submission package is to ride. So, while you see only a few pages up here, there's gonna be dozens and dozens of pages that'll be put together to actually be part of the submission, both to the cost estimator and then to RIDE for the supplement.
Hey, Mark, one additional
Yeah.
question.
Sure.
A couple months ago, we learned that we were gonna have a much more in-depth archaeological dig on that site. Can you tell us where we are in that regard?
We're still out, I think we're still out getting the quotes from the archaeological subcontractor. That was another thing about the softball field, having that not be in contract reduces, they only need to do their probes where we're actually disturbing the land.
Right, that's
Right.
right, yeah.
And just to be, just to put a little bit more context on it, where they have found historical artifacts is to the south of the site. So, the more we can, the less we disturb to the south is probably gonna be to our advantage. So that was kind of a nice silver lining to that. But that was one of the things, we needed to determine exactly what our site plan was, so we knew the area of disturbance before we could get a quote from our archaeological subconsultant.
And that's in process now?
Yeah, it
That's-
is.
Super, thanks.
I have a question regarding, first off, thanks Sam for mentioning the narratives and everything else that goes to the estimator. Along those lines, what are we giving them as far as logistics? Like, a big part of the cost here is gonna be phasing with the existing building and how we interact with that as we build the new building. What
Mhm.
information are we giving to the estimator at this point? Are we just, adding a percentage, cause it's gonna be, a big part of the construction phase?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I wish I had a better answer for that in terms of, other than us informing them on that kind of phasing and the demolition of the existing school.
Mark, if I could
Yeah,
just add
yeah,
too, I
please.
think if you go to the site plan, my understanding, Mark, from talking with you and Tina,
Mhm.
is that the proposed driveway that kind of runs north-south relatively aligns with the existing roadway,
It does.
so that you could have a hard line where construction fence sits on west side of that roadway. All the mobilization and everything happens within that zone, so you have a clean, safe, segregated site for school operations. So you build on that one side, everything comes vertical, then you flip, and then you kind of move over to the other side. Very simplified, it doesn't answer all those questions, but I think talking through that, and also the timing around it, because for the demolition, right, that's gonna happen so many years out after you've completed and turned over the building. How do you think about escalation on that demolition specifically, because it's happening so far out? So I think we need to work with the estimator to make sure that they've kind of built in some of those numbers and allowances, if not perfect, to kind of know that we've got that in there. So
Yeah. I mean, if
It's a
you,
great point.
yeah, and something we've discussed a lot about in terms of, carrying the general conditions for having contractors on site, how long, what's the duration of the project? Those are all things that we have, looked at in terms of cost savings and wanting to make sure that we allot for the appropriate amount of time. But that's one of those things that we're coordinate with the cost estimate.
Thank you.
Mark, can I go back to the, not necessarily just the archaeological
Mhm.
study, but just any sort of groundwork, feasibility for the existing area? It seems like you said, and maybe I'm misunderstanding, that we're only gonna do a certain amount of site there. I guess my question is, are we doing enough to ensure that we are 100% covered, that this site is feasible, that we're not gonna run into any oopses or issues? Obviously, there are always some risks, but,
Mhm. So sorry, my understanding is that we can do our probes for structural probes, the geotech, and those also serve as the archaeological dig, if you will. So there's some economy there, so in terms of where we're doing that, but that's what those probes will be for, to try to, we'll identify where the footprint of the building is, so that they can make some reasonable assumptions about, the quality of the ground, rock, whatever there is there in terms of the, anticipating what the foundation and structure needs to be.
okay,
I do, Megan, just to answer the question a little bit more, you're only as good as where you do your investigation. And anybody that's done a project before knows that you could dig here and be perfect, and then you dig 10 feet away and you hit ledge, you hit contamination, you hit something. So I think what we need to make sure is that we're meeting the HPHC requirements
Mhm.
for the number of samples that are taken. And I don't know if they were clear on that, Mark, and Tina might have that answer about, how many locations we had to do, or is
Yeah.
it more about disturbance? So is it focused around footprint? And then do you take a lighter approach as you move away from the building footprint with the site work, where there's not as much deep excavation going on? We will always have the risk that they put a shovel in the ground in a different location and they find something, and what's the process? Now, hopefully the process is record, preserve, relocate, or whatever that might be, as opposed to stop, but we don't know that. So I think when we do this first step with HPAC, we're
Mhm.
gonna at least get a good idea of what we think the conditions are out there. And then they're gonna have to weigh in and say, this, you've met our standard for investigation. If you find anything during the process, this is what we're gonna have to do. So I think there's no perfection in it unless you excavated the whole site to kind of, and sifted through, every grain of sand that was kind of coming out of the ground there. So it will be it'll be a good look at it, but it may not answer what might happen in the future.
and I can appreciate that. I guess I just wanna make sure that, in this process, that we're doing as much as we possibly can and should be, and I'm sure we are, but I have to say it. And just to make sure that we're not kinda doing like, oh, this is all they expect of us, so we're just gonna hit this mark just to kinda check a box.
Yeah, and I think
So-
I think it's two distinct things, right? The archaeological dig, we respect that, but also don't wanna necessarily expose the district to costs that we could avoid, versus the construction of the school and wanting to make sure that we have, so those aren't the same thing, right?
Right,
In terms of
right.
what we're looking for.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Hey Sam, just a quick question, experience-wise. Of the projects you've done in the state of Rhode Island, when you put a shovel in the dirt, how many times does dirt come back questionable or contaminated? 50%, 80%, 10%?
It depends where. Like we do a lot of work in urban districts,
Mm.
so we tend to find more urban fill, which is a commonly occurring condition in soil, but sometimes we'll exceed DEM tolerances. We worked with you on a school in East Providence where we found buried tires and that kind of stuff, which then trips a whole different process. But we had done full investigation across that site and had not found anything. So it really is kind of, area by area when you're doing that. I think here that the environmental ESA will give us, the phase 2 will give us a better understanding of potential, because what PAR will do as a subconsultant to to Perkins Eastman, they'll come up with a suggested, number of borings that they think they need to take in order to determine if there's any known contaminants based on what they saw in the phase one. Suitability is a whole different discussion, so structural suitability of that soil is a different discussion that the geotech is gonna look at. So you're kind of looking at a lot of different variables when we're looking at the soil. Is archaeological, which is not typical from our from our experience, and then it's contamination and it's suitability for construction. And that suitability will dictate what type of footings, or do you have to look at an alternative way to kind of do the subsurface foundation work to kind of bring it up to, the baseline. So we certainly, we've seen our fair share of contamination. And it can be things as common as arsenic that is naturally occurring in the soil, but typically exceeds, or it can be, there's a known petroleum or some of these other more significant kind of contamination issues you have to deal with.
Okay.
So
it's not uncommon to
No, no.
get, to run
And
something.
And usually there's a solution. Sometimes it's cap it, so the state has a process by which you can cap known contaminants. Because it's a school site, even though it's an existing school site, you still have to meet the standards for safe, the school siting law, which is what PAR will do as part of their process. But we've certainly have had contamination at other sites, and through remediation or removal, you can deal with it. Removal, much more expensive, but it also depends on what the type of contamination is, to kind of make that call. And that ultimately will be something that if found, we would bring before this group to make that decision. The team would bring forward the findings, and then kind of weigh the cost versus, removal versus capping in place, or whatever the remediation is, and then make that decision together.
Can you remind me, when is the phase two gonna be completed?
So I think now that we've got the contract in place, I think now we're working with that Perkins Eastman's working with that subconsultant to get that going.
Got it.
Yeah.
And then, I'm assuming you're gonna include some level of allowance in the cost estimate for potential soil
Yeah.
contaminations,
Yep.
unsuitability,
Yeah.
okay.
We're gonna have a lot of those in this first
That's what I
round, because
figured.
we're kind of like halfway through schematic, and we're doing this for the stage two, so. Yeah, and we will welcome, critique and adjustments to that budget when we present it back to you guys. Because we certainly have our industry knowledge, but it doesn't mean that it should be influenced by, by this group, and then ultimately up to whoever the approving bodies are.
And, PAR is doing the phase two.
Right, and that's good, because they did the phase one, so they kind of know the lay of the land. They've been around the property for the phase one work. None of that was physical, that was all kind of desktop and file review. Now it's, okay, now we take that, they found enough of the recognized environmental concerns, which are recs, where they said, yes, this warrants it, even if it is, I would say it was kind of right on the borderline of requiring that. And
We did
sometimes
some pit testing as well earlier, didn't we?
You guys
We did.
Yeah, we did
Yes.
pit testing earlier in the process.
But I don't think that was for environmental though.
No, I
Yeah,
don't
that
think
was for geo,
Yeah,
that
that
was
was-
for structural. So.
Yeah.
And look, an abandoned tank that wasn't closed properly trips a phase two. So it can be things as simple as that, or it can be things of, a pre-existing use on this property back in the early 20th century, gives enough of an indicator where you have to do more significant testing. I don't know the history, even though I went here, I don't know the history of what it was Whitford Middle School. I suspect it's been that condition probably for quite some time, if not, looking back permanently, but there's always some kind of pre-existing use out there that you have to kind of think about. Or a gas station right across the street, which is a little bit down gradient. Sometimes when you have a dry cleaner, gas station, those kind of things, then the phase two will kind of raise an issue to say, is there a concern with groundwater contamination? I don't think any of that came up in the phase one, but
No.
those are the kind of things that'll come out in that phase two work.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you, Sam.
I'll preface this question with, I don't really know anything about how the geothermal thing works, but just in my head, it just popped up that there's gonna be many, many geothermal wells dug. So I don't know how deep they are, and I'm not sure whether or not you can, I'm assuming for siting each of those wells, there has to be some kind of a soil boring or something done for each of those where they're gonna be
Yeah, so
sited.
that'll,
And I don't know if there's any way you kinda get a 2-for-1 if if you use some of those sites to do the bore testing that you're looking for, that might also be coincidentally the same spot where the geothermal wells might be. So, I don't know if it's helpful.
I don't know that we're able to do that,
Okay.
to reuse
Yeah,
the drill, but just as a point of fact, currently the geothermal will be where the parking is now, that's where, so we will do testing in that area as well to determine.
not just under the footprint of the school.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
and for the geothermal, they will do one test well early
Okay.
to kind of really validate viability. So, and that well will be used as one of the
Right.
permanent wells.
Okay.
So the good thing there is you're getting the bang for the buck of doing the first one to do that test well, and that becomes one of the future wells. And I don't know how many we'll need on this, but that'll be
I'm
part of
not
that
sure, yeah.
feasibility analysis.
Yeah.
And I think the pits that they dug out there, they were looking for stray evidence of like old landfill and all that kind of stuff. I don't think it was done for.
It was done for suitability for structure, not
Structure,
for the,
okay.
quality of it.
As well as finding anything that might be.
Yeah.
I think the other good thing that this brings up as we're talking about it, we're gonna be doing some of this mobilization, and it's gonna be happening likely during the school year, so what
Yeah.
we're gonna have to do is work very closely with the district, with you, to say, okay, here are the schedules, here's what's gonna be happening during those timeframes. How does that impact, athletic and outside activities? You know, areas, timeframes where you guys say, you can't do it in this week because of whatever activity might be going on. So that's gonna be a lot of coordination that once we get that schedule together, we'll sit in a more detailed group and kind of walk through
Right.
when and how those are all gonna happen, and let you guys react to it and say, here are the blackout days that we can't have you do anything, and then what does that restoration look like after they dig a pit? How does it get restored to as close to a as-is condition? And do we need assistance from the facilities department maybe to come back over and loam and seed, or whatever those things are, to kind of make sure that it's back to a condition that can be used by the students and the staff.
Any other questions? Mark, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ed Sifuni from DBVM.
W.
D-
Close.
You know what? I'll
Close.
continue to butcher that
It's
name.
an
I'm
upside
sorry.
down.
Good evening, everybody.
Thank you.
So we've been busy, as you mentioned. Part of what was discussed at the last building committee was the reprioritization and the change in focus, primarily on the 5 to 10 year CIP needs. And as part of this, which we'll delve into in a couple of slides, is the sort of backburnering of the open plan classroom conversions at Stony Lane, Quidnessa, and Fishing Cove. Instead, the focus would be primarily on the first one, the roof replacement at all of the buildings except Davisville that was done recently. Number two, I think most importantly, which has been mentioned several times tonight already, the parity between both Davisville and the new Wickford Middle School. And we've been looking primarily at the types of programs that are going to be offered and the organization of the spaces to make sure that there's some parity, as well as what the building actually looks like. You know, there's going to be this nice shiny diamond on one side, and we don't want it to look like 1968 on the other. And that's been part of the challenge. With the idea being that the money that was previously allocated for the open plan classrooms, we could repurpose towards sort of amping up the scope at Davisville. And I'll get into the specifics in a few slides. And the third, more importantly, would be trying to focus primarily on the stabilization of the elementary schools, which would be primarily the roofs, as we mentioned earlier, but also secure vestibules, which is an important thing to keep the building operational. The accessible site routes, because there's accessibility issues getting in and out of the buildings. And then we've identified as an educational improvement and enhancement, in speaking with Riot on that bi-weekly basis, to do new media centers in every building. And I think that's going to be an immediate change to each one of the elementary schools. And then, sort of tangentially to that, in the background, we helped the district with the emergency fund requests for water cooler replacement, flooring replacement, and the RTU repairs at Stony Lane, which The reason I'm mentioning it is because the state has advised us that actually is part of the ask. They've approved the monies for the district already, but that has to be included just so
Part of
that,
the whole bond, you said.
part of the whole bond,
Right, part of the stage 2 supplement.
Gotcha.
correct. So the things we're gonna go over now in the next few slides, I just wanted to make mention. This is sort of our attempt at the reprioritization of scope and what we think is doable from both a physical standpoint and an educational standpoint. Since we haven't put this out to estimate yet, we really don't know what of this scope is gonna be able to fit in the bond money. And as I mentioned before in some of our working group meetings, RIDE has actually encouraged us to submit as much work as we can in this ask. And if it gets approved, you only are required to spend 50% of it. So we know realistically we have the bond money and the other capital money that was associated with it. But if we get the approval and it gives the town some flexibility in the next 5 years, great. If it doesn't, no harm, no foul.
And one thing before you get started is that I thought a lot about after the last school committee meeting. There seemed to be some confusion around having to quickly get this decision made, and we're not gonna have enough time. And Sam, and you guys can jump in on this with me, but having gone through all these meetings and kind of better understanding the process than maybe most people or a lot of people out there, I think something that you kind of just touched upon it, I think something that's important to let everybody know or remind people is when we submit to RIDE, we're not submitting this is what we are going to do. What we're submitting is this is a list of items, like you just said. Put as much on as we possibly can. We're submitting kind of for a reimbursement approval. And although we should have some idea of our prioritization levels, for instance, roofs, definitely, right? That's gonna be top priority. But there will be some items that maybe we don't necessarily prioritize or that may end up getting shifted around after the stage 2 submission, and that's okay, as long as they've already been added to the list. We
Correct.
can't go back after stage 2
Correct.
and add them and ask for
We can't say oops
reimbursement.
later.
Right, exactly. So I think that even the school committee, during that meeting, there was some misunderstanding of feeling pressured to actually come up with a decision. I think that working process happens after stage 2. I think that we submit everything with some idea of priorities, but not the actual list that we're also going to use our CIP money on that we do have. So we don't have to have a solid, this is the, not even $60 million, 51.7 that we have to use. And after stage 2, we can come sit down and take our time as a school committee, as a building subcommittee, as an internal working group with your recommendations for how we should prioritize and where we should put our money, and obviously come up with a plan sooner rather than later. But I just feel like there was maybe this concept that we had to rush.
I think what I'd like to say to add to that, Megan, is that the 3 priorities that we just identified are actually that. And as a result of this, we're trying to build a project. The list is just that, it's a list. So if our project, and let me jump ahead to the next slide, if you would. We had shown you this before, I'm not gonna get into that, bear with me. Can you jump to,
Sorry, I made you skip around.
yeah, no, that's okay, no, it's actually good, it keeps it more fluid. So, in terms of trying to look at this from,
Page 7, right?
yes, from a practical standpoint of what we're submitting to RIDE, what the actual plan is for delivery, right, what the priorities are. The high school roof replacement, we saw as an immediate need. It's something that we can actually get through quickly and try and not lose next summer on, in terms of the available summers that we have. So that's the other thing in terms of trying to plan this. This is all summer work. We don't have the ability to take a group of kids out of any one of these schools and move them someplace else to free the building up to get this done expediently. We're dealing with summers, or like what I'd like to say, expanded summers. If we can get work done a little bit earlier, before school gets out, and a little bit later when school starts in September, we're gonna have to try and figure out how to get all this done, because we don't wanna be at this for 10 years. It'll cost too much money, quite honestly. and you won't have anything to show for it. So, back to the project piece. The second piece, the elementary school roof replacement and the other limited improvements, which I'll jump back to and explain in terms of what that encompasses. That's the next package, if you will. And then it's the Davis Middle School improvements. Now, what each project has in terms of, I'm sorry, my pen is sliding, in terms of bundled in that project, you know, so we might say secure vestibule is a top priority. Yes. Okay. Well, maybe a toilet room doesn't get renovated as a for instance as we get further in the process, but it's in the scope now. We can play with that as we need to, both to balance the budget and the desires of the community as we move forward through stage 3. But we're asking for the whole piece now.
Yeah, and I think those three major buckets, right, is kind of that to me is like the global prioritization, knowing that within each of those scopes, even within Davisville Middle, you know, we heard loud and clear from the committee at the last meeting that needed to be kind of elevated up as a focus area. But there's gonna be even scope within that will be on the outside looking in, because if you did everything on Davisville Middle that you needed to do, you could probably spend almost all of your $51 million easily if
Right.
you really wanted to make that investment. So I think that's all, there's gonna be prioritization of the global 3 buckets, and then there's gonna be prioritization within each of those buckets that again will happen. That'll be an ongoing discussion, as we move through into stage 3, as we understand costs better, as we understand I think, you know, the ability for the district to absorb this amount of work in a 5-year period, because that's a whole other thing that we haven't really gotten into the weeds on. You know, how much construction do you wanna have going on at one point in the district? Because it's a lot to have, and granted, these are all mostly summer projects, but they are gonna probably push the boundaries of the end of the school year and the beginning of the school year, because otherwise, you're gonna be.
Right, we have to make sure that the projects that we identify that we're doing during each school year, fiscal year, are going to be able to be projects that we can complete
That you can finish.
with
Right.
minimal distractions. to-
Correct.
And those
Each
are
of
hard.
our-
You have 10 weeks basically.
And before we leave this slide, we tried to take an approach, again, back to the card trick, when we would potentially put these out on the street to bid and when they might be constructed, for 2 reasons. One, we need plan A to discuss, and 2, more importantly, we need to give the estimator some information to put the appropriate escalation to that project. So we've taken an approach here to just try and take a stab at how that would divvy up for that purpose. Now, can we change it later? Absolutely. But we needed to start.
Yeah.
As I always say, we need to start at A, we got a whole alphabet.
And there's an entire list, right? We're going to put projects out there that put us over budget, but if we don't, and they don't get approved, then you can't do anything. And there's
Correct.
decisions we're gonna have to make over the next 5 years with these projects.
Correct.
And that's what everyone's gonna have to understand. And also, RIDE's expectation is that you complete 50% of those projects.
Correct.
I'm not saying we're only gonna
At
complete.
least.
Correct, at least 50%. That doesn't mean, okay, only do 50%, but there's room there for us to say, okay, we're gonna put forward these 3 buckets of projects, and as we go through each 2 years down the road, we might get to a project and realize, okay, well, while we're doing A, it makes sense to do B.
Right.
And it's been approved, and that's what we're going to tie into.
Correct.
And I just feel like that was the piece that was missing the other night at the meeting, just that understanding of, we don't have to have a plan 100% in place with all of what we're gonna spend, and we can't shift that plan.
I think
After September 15th.
this presentation was what was missing. Just to be my perspective, anyway.
So essentially, yeah, just to make sure I'm clear, so we could essentially submit $100 million worth of projects because we have more or less $50 million we can spend.
Yes.
So, okay,
Yeah, without, I mean,
without having repercussions for the district.
there is they say that they could claw back housing aid if you don't hit the 50%
This one,
mark.
yeah,
We've never seen it, but we've also never seen a district not hit that 50%.
because, yeah, I'm just trying to get, like,
Correct.
what stops us from putting in, a wish list for every school gets,
Yeah.
Well, I think that's the tough tightrope
Think part of
walk
it
that
is
we
time.
have with this CIP plan.
I'm not suggesting that.
Sorry,
The
say
ci-
again?
The tightrope walk that we have with the CIP plan is you have physical needs at all of these buildings, which the list is very extensive, right? Then you have the balance of, and we're gonna call that the warm, safe, dry issues. which the roofs fall into. Then you have the educational needs or the educational deficiencies that exist in all of the buildings. You could pump $200 million into all of these buildings and not address any of the educational needs, and no one would ever know, for the most part. So it's about balance. You want to do stuff that protects the warm, safe, dry, that keeps everything operating in a high-quality environment, but you also need to do enhancements to bring these schools into the 21st century. And that's one of the reasons why we included the media centers in there. It's an immediate benefit to the school. Even something as simple as, and I'll get to it in a few minutes, I know I'm jumping the gun here, but the divider curtains in the gyms that don't operate in several schools. Replacing those so that they're actually usable from a day-to-day basis, so that now they can be divided and used for other things, and that one large room isn't tied up for 10 kids, is going to be immensely helpful on an everyday basis. And that's something that you could argue the merits of, but it'll have a direct effect for very little money. Okay, sorry. If we go back to the Stony Lane slide, Matt, yeah, right after that. Thank you. So, why are we recommending backing off of the open plan classroom conversions? We sort of talked about this at the last committee meeting, and we had this graphic at each one of the schools. We'll just start here at Stony Lane. The area in red is the area that would be touched by the originally proposed renovations to convert. When we went through the buildings, we realized that the orange areas would also really need to be included in that in order to make the school sort of work a lot better. And when we looked at that, roughly, again, at Stony Lane, we would be touching 62% of the area of the building. So at what point do you say we draw the line in the sand and we ignore everything on this side, but we take everything on the other side and make it right? But let's say we're on that track for a moment. Just in terms of trying to approximate the cost at all three of those buildings, Stony Lane, Quidnessa, and Fishing Cove, we kind of did a back and napkin, rough order of magnitude based on our experience calculation. And that would be anywhere from 30 to 32 million at a 51 and a half. And we only touched three of the buildings. We didn't touch anything else that's in the need relative to the warm, safe, dry issues or the educational issues at any of the other buildings. The roof work, we kind of ballparked as between 15 and 16 million in total. I mean, that leaves about 3 to 4 million left to take care of all those other things. So it really isn't an equitable situation, both from a district standpoint. Most importantly, back to what I mentioned earlier about parity between Wickford and Davisville, because this doesn't include any of that. I mean, $3 million on a building that's almost 120,000 square feet doesn't go very far. So, Stony Lane here for a moment. We did actually take a hard look at trying to create new classroom spaces in this building, and I'm gonna step over here for a moment. This addition was not part of the original construction. There aren't a lot of exterior windows on this building to begin with. They're exterior egress doors with a narrow window next to it. That's the way the building was planned back in the 70s. And because it was an open room. The minute this addition went on, it actually blocked most of this north wall from any daylight. So when we started to lay out the classrooms in here, particularly at Stony, because this is a 3-track school, there are 3 classrooms per grade. In trying to meet the current RIDE standards, which we would need to meet for new spaces, yes, we could ask for a variance, but space variances within reason, I'll say within 10% roughly, are reasonable. We would need a space variance of like 20%. And we would still be 3 kindergarten classrooms short in this building. So the other crazy thing is, back to the natural light, we would have all of those rooms embedded in the building with 0 exterior exposure. We could cut windows in on the south and the east side. Would cost money, but it could be done. We can't do anything on that north side.
And that's a deal killer from the ride standpoint?
you can't skylight, I mean, it's just an awful educational environment. So, you know, this is one of the reasons why we said, look, let's take another step back and think about, does it make sense to put all that money into the school when long-term, maybe it's not the right solution for the district? We can't figure it out now, but if we try and not to waste the money that's in front of us and stabilize this instead and focus back on the parity in lieu of trying to fix all of the problems in 3 buildings, maybe that's a better solution for the town. We deal with that 5 to 10 year problem instead of a 30 to 40 year problem.
Ed, and just, in your opinion, this would have to be a phased, like, we couldn't do all this in one summer, so you're taking this building offline? Or
We did
phase- or
actually think
phasing?
about it, so we thought, you know, maybe you do the south
Take
side
that off
one
on-
summer, the north side another summer, and the middle in another, but, you know, this complicates it.
Estimates cost.
Quidnesset, if you flip to the next one, Matt, Quidnesset is very similar, but it's actually an easier one to solve because we don't have that totally blocked north elevation. And, it's only a 2-track school, so there are less classrooms
Well, right now, today,
today.
we don't know what that's gonna be in the future. 'Cause
Correct.
we're looking through redistricting and how we're going to have possible
Back to the
changes
long-term
there.
plan.
And so it may not be a 2-track, it could be a 3-track.
The other thing to note in all of these buildings, because of the date of the original construction, none of them have insulated exterior walls. It's something that we'd have to deal with at some point. Energy efficiency is an issue. You can only improve it so far without spending a lot of money and not getting a full return on it. Again, with the sequencing and phasing of construction, this becomes even more problematic.
I think we wanna be careful with locking ourselves in as a district with building walls with our current model, not knowing what our future's going to hold and how many students we may need in that school and how many classrooms we may need when we're discussing possible redistricting.
And if you flip forward to Fishing Cove, again, it's a similar situation here. Interestingly enough, the 2-story wing was actually built at the same time that Quidnesset and Stony Lane were, in the same kind of a model. It was the open plan classroom. So again, here, same issues, although we're touching 42% of the building. I mean, this is really the only 2-story piece in all of the elementaries. If you flip ahead to the high school. So the high school, as I mentioned, the roof, I don't think, is a big issue, but there are a few other things in the scope that we wanna get in the ask. The guardrails in the auditoriums, the, grab bars in the ambulatory stalls and in the restrooms, those are easy things to fix. And then we identified the emergency requests that went in as well. I think focusing on the high school roof as an early package is a very easy thing to do. It's also not gonna be cheap, but we're gonna find that out by the end of the month.
We see that roof as a 2-summer roof. What do you think?
Hopefully an extended season,
Okay.
because we backed off on the type of roof, I think it could be done. And we know that that roof, since it's a modern roof, is not, has no hazardous materials.
Yeah, so no abatement is required on that one.
That's the only reason why I think it's doable.
But I think it would also be that extended shoulder season
Yes,
in order to make that happen. So I think that's the thing we're gonna have to evaluate as we get to that point.
that's the challenge.
Right.
And we're trying to minimize the disruption to education as we plan all of this, but again, you know, we're trying to go 1,000 miles an hour and build enough into this so that we get a reasonable estimate, not too low, not too high, something that's, you know, where we think is workable and we can all agree on. Go to the next slide. So in focusing our attention back at Davisville, this plan, the colors represent program, not necessarily scope. This is the way the building sits today. It was built as a junior high, so it has things like a wood shop that you wouldn't normally see in a middle school, which is a great attraction. Also has a great central courtyard that's underutilized, that's being improved right now through a grant, and we hope to improve even further with this project. Initially, we said, okay, so what are the basic warm, safe, dry needs that we need here, since we don't need to deal with the roof? Things that were on the scope, the last submission, new VRF cooling system, cabinet unit heater and exhaust fan replacement, building management system, light control system. Those are all gonna remain if we can afford it. In going through the building, we realized there were some code issues in the building relative to fire separation, fire ratings. And although they could be cured without a sprinkler system, they're actually more invasive and hence longer to do. We think it makes more sense to put a new fire suppression system in this building to not only alleviate those issues, but also to add to the safety in that building. Since it's one of the buildings that was identified as a long-term investment, we think it makes a lot of sense. And then if you go to the next slide, this one's a little harder to read, but we tried to leverage some of the planning that was done at Wickford in terms of what types of programs there were, how the teams worked, and where the new program should be in the existing building. This building, we do have the sort of available space. There's a little bit more space in here than would be programmed in a new building. So in trying to move the program around, things like moving the art room, I'm gonna come over here, moving the art room down here to be adjacent to the music program, to align that. Building on the wood shop that's here now and moving robotics and technology down there with the operable partition, so that there's some synergy to a, sort of a middle school nascent CTE program. Trying to get a proper space for life skills with their own dedicated toilet with changing table in it and washer dryer alcove and equipment storage in the old home ec room that's sort of underutilized. Working with the enormous space that's available in the original locker rooms and trying to renovate one side to house new locker rooms and public toilets and sort of just leave the rest for a future date. Trying to get a secure entry vestibule here, renovating the media center, the guidance suite, the main admin to help facilitate that secure entrance. Renovating the nurses suite because it's totally it's not right.
Yeah.
In the classroom area, the two-story wing, it's an interesting building because all of this is on the main level, and then it's a half level up to the second floor, a half level down, which is interesting, but right now the way to get there if you're handicapped is there's a platform lift here to take you down a half a level. You come across to an elevator here to go up, which is fine on this side. If I'm on this wing, I have to go all the way down here, go up and down, and come all the way back if I want to go to the media center, which doesn't really facilitate the flow in terms of building usage. So we're proposing a new 3-stop elevator on this side to directly connect to the specials, right? This is sort of the main street of the specials, if you will, and the teams are located in that 2-story wing. We want to relocate the science rooms back into the wing and create proper labs. We want to create dedicated resource rooms, again, similar to Wickford, and breakout spaces and intervention spaces. So those are immediate things that people are going to see. The main entrance, again, trying to reinvent this building. We're proposing demolishing that low canopy out there that you can bang your head on if you walk too fast, and put sort of a new monumental canopy out there that welcome people in. It showed that something new is done. Most people won't ever set foot in this building, but they'll drive by it and say, oh look, they didn't do anything. We spent $30 million on that building and they did nothing. Well, they'll see that. if they come into the building for an open house, they'll see all of the improvements on the program on Main Street that hopefully we can get some transparency in here and be able to get that.
Could you talk about what's going on in the courtyard right now and what you propose for courtyard usage?
So the courtyard now that Grant is cleaning up all of the planting and the hardscape in there. There's an existing cast-in-place concrete amphitheater. So what we'd like to do is create a direct connection from the art room into that courtyard, and from the lower level through that breakout space into the lower level of the courtyard down there, and then create handicap ramp to get from top to bottom inside the courtyard without going back into the building. There are plans now to expand this pavement so that there's an outdoor classroom area here. We want to create another one on the west side of the courtyard as well. And then try and get safety improvements, guardrails and whatnot, sets of stairs in there so that the kids can actually use this. You could probably have 2 or 3 classes out there at a time. It's a nice, secure, safe space. To facilitate that, we need to re-swing the doors on either end for egress so that it comes back into the building instead of into the courtyard. It's not a big deal, but it needs to be done.
Gotcha.
So these are all minor improvements, but obviously they all have a cost, right? But they're gonna have a big impact on the way this building feels at the end of the day. And I don't think, I forgot to mention, there are about 1,000 lockers in this building now. We counted them. To make Main Street a little bit more inviting, we're gonna get rid of all of the lockers on Main Street. And we're gonna selectively get rid of the lockers around the resource breakout spaces on each floor to make that a little bit nicer. We need a little over 500 lockers in this building when we're done, and you'll have more than enough.
And there's 1,000 there right now.
There's 1,000 there right now.
I have to say, having heard this now a second time, and having had 2 children go through that school, been in that school a ton, and my third one's just starting there this September, just the change in flow and the placement of the classrooms and making it make sense and making it actually go together where the classrooms should be and the specials should be and everything, and getting rid of 500 lockers you don't need and using space that is there but we haven't been using it the right way is really exciting. I'm very impressed by I really didn't think too much about the DMS side of this because we're talking about so many other buildings, but now that you're going through all this, to me some of this is so simple. It's just as simple as better flow.
When you think about it, right, so when you come in, you're going in, you have a fine arts wing, and
Right.
when you're putting technology and robotics and all of that together, you're creating a large space that becomes a common area.
Right.
And then when I said yesterday when I met with them, I said, we don't want just doors, like, can it be a wall that moves? That way, if you have a team that wants to come in and they want to do something that's hands-on, something STEM related or integrated between math and science, you have that space now. And that's another common space that can be used for your teams to do integrated work together. And you have art, music, everyone's together. And then you move your classrooms on the other side. And it makes sense for the flow, and it's going to, I think, have more engagement. We talk about even within that space of the technology, maybe windows on the outside, so when kids are walking through, teachers are walking through the school, you see what's happening inside that room, and you can showcase certain things that's going on.
You like inside the wood shop, inside robotics,
Yeah.
inside, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right.
I think in general, we are becoming a society that is much more engaged with education in, activities and project-based versus the traditional just sitting at desks. And I think so many children are visual learners, so you're right, walking by a classroom and seeing that, it just automatically might engage students who may otherwise be disengaged from seeing, on a paper, woodwork, I have woodwork on my schedule, or I have math, or whatever, right? Oh, look, there's science, but they're up there moving around, I mean,
Right.
just
I wanna be in
visualize it.
there.
Right, I
Yeah.
wanna be in there, and of course, it's still middle school, nobody really wants to be in class, but, just that,
Think of it as
being able
the
to see-
formative years.
Right. So I really like the flow idea.
And, you know,
Better flow.
we can't give the whole building a facelift, but one of the important things, and I've mentioned this before in our working groups, things as simple as painting the entire interior of the building. That's on the list for all of the buildings except for the high school. We have, right now, if we can afford it, all new furniture in this building. Because if you walk through the building, you've seen every vintage from the fifties all the way up to the 2000s in
There's
this
some old
building.
desks in there. Some really old desks.
Eisenhower,
Original desks.
Eisenhower would recognize some of
The
those
original
desks.
building.
You what?
Eisenhower would recognize some of
There's
those.
original desk.
I like the idea
But-
that we give a lot more equity between the two middle schools, because I think that's gonna be something that, once Wickford Middle is open, we'll start hearing from parents of, why do I have to go to the old one? So if we do this to DMS, I think that will give us a better, use of our money in making sure that there is more equity between the two schools.
And Kim, you're right, that was a major focus on the feedback we received from RIDE. Look at this, look at this, look at this, repeatedly said by them, so.
I think that's been
Nail
mentioned
on
in
the
almost
head.
every phone call we've had.
Well, we did.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, we
And
listened.
And I mean, some of the stuff was already on the list. We
Right.
knew this from stage one. We knew that that was the direction they were heading in.
But this
makes
list
sense.
here represents the reprioritization of, these are the things we wanna do. As I mentioned, we don't know what in this is gonna fit in the budget yet, we're working on that. And some of these things may have to drop off and not be done in this phase, but if you plan for it now, the money you spend now won't have to be undoing something later on.
Right.
You can build on it, and if you get money in the future, you can do
Go back
part,
to the list.
part two, part three, whatever it is.
Yeah, I think the hardest part will be picking the scope, especially in DMS, that is the scope that's part of this first round of work, right? Cause again, I think this is probably oversubscribing even for whatever chunk we are gonna allocate
Yes.
to DMS.
Most certainly.
But I think you have to look at it comprehensively, like you can't just say, oh, we'll just do this little piece here, because if we're thinking about parity, if we're thinking about the, the direction from you is make sure we're focusing on DMS as one of the critical pieces of this CIP work. You have to look at it with the full lens, and then again, it might be picking it apart over multiple rounds of funding or multiple rounds of projects that'll happen.
And the other thing too, like, this is just this group looking at it, the internal project team looking at this, putting this together. We haven't brought this to DMS yet to look at.
That's the
You know,
next step.
I've sent an email to the principal, I shared the plans with her, but she hasn't been part of this conversation yet, because we're moving quick to try to look at how you can redesign. So we're gonna have to sit down with the principal and some teachers to say, look at this, does this work?
But
Is
the
this
good thing
where-
from
where-
our
what-
standpoint is, once we commit to move a room like the science lab, let's say, whether that room's here, over here, it's in the budget, right? It's a priority, so this is what we'd like to do. We do have a list of alternates, and this may have to grow based on where we find the budget actually will support it.
Understood.
So is this essentially what you want the building to look like, let's say in 10 years, or 15 years?
If money were no object, we'd like this to be done by the end of this phase.
Yeah, 'cause I just don't see, the new elevator, where there's not a shaft,
Oh, yeah,
massive cost.
It is.
and serious
But it can be
disruptive
done.
work.
Yeah,
too, right? Yeah.
it definitely can be done, I've seen it done, but it is, disruptive work, like you said, and,
Yes.
I just wanna make sure we're tempering expectations that all this done by 2030 is probably,
Well, we're planning on this as 4 summers. Whether or not it's enough, like I said, extended summers.
Yeah, and we had a discussion in our card trick meeting, it quickly ended, but, we said, look, would you try to swing all these students out and do this as a comprehensive one-shot project? That comes with a lot of cost savings and less disruption, but where do you move all these
yeah,
students?
this was going through my mind, is phasing,
Mm-hmm.
always tied to budget.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of moving parts that we certainly know are there, but have not scratched the surface
Yeah,
on.
I'm definitely not trying to be critical,
No,
this is
no,
a great list, and I think this is
be
the way to
critical.
look at it holistically, what do we really want the building to look
Yeah.
like, and if you bite pieces off over the course of 5 years, you're heading in the right direction.
And I think we have to temper every discussion we have, especially in larger groups, that not all this is gonna happen,
Yeah,
right?
so like if
we
the
want a
community
reality.
saw this and said, oh, this is great,
Yeah.
this is the new
It needs to
layout
be
for Davis
understanding
Middle
that
School.
that's not what's going to be done in a year. That's what
Exactly.
Right.
the future will be once we prioritize what we can do with the current budget, what we're going to need for the future budget, and how we're going to budget for those funds as well to do
Correct.
these projects.
Perfect.
Yeah, I mean, we will say it repeatedly, that, you know, we will caveat every time we speak, and we hope that the folks here that are kind of the champions of process will also kind of be our voice out to the community in these discussions, but I think it has to be repeated that, you know, this is a process, it's gonna take a long time to figure all these things out, and not everything will happen.
What's that say, Matt?
Yeah, that note's not on here.
That's, I can read it if you'd like. The scope of the improvement shown is anticipated to exceed the bond amount. The final scope of improvements will be evaluated and prioritized following a rough order of magnitude construction cost estimate to be prepared by a professional cost estimator. That's what we're gonna start on Friday.
So we're gonna need that updated slide, because that's not what we have on our website.
This is what I sent out.
It might not be
Yesterday.
on the printout, so
Okay,
I'll
but
make sure you have it.
If it was on yesterday's version.
It was
You
on
said-
yesterday
Okay.
afternoon.
What you said last
Yeah,
night.
we gotta make sure you
what
have
was
it right.
emailed out is correct, it's just what's printed is.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll make sure you have it right.
As
But
well-
the last
As long
sen-
as they get the absolute correct, because they're the ones that put it on the,
Yeah,
but-
the one
the
that was
website,
emailed,
I don't.
emailed was correct.
Okay.
The last sentence is the most important. Improvements for this CIP will be limited to those that fit within available funding. We know what the budget is, right? We just need to figure it out. Like I said, we're moving at 1,000 miles an hour.
I
Um,
mean, I think what's good about this though is that it's a comprehensive plan that works together. All the pieces are being put together into one big giant puzzle versus we'll do a little bit of hit this and patchwork and then we'll spend money on this and then in another 5 years we'll spend money on this. And then you kinda get what we have now, which is, oh my god, why did they do this 10 years ago or 15 years ago? So we need a comprehensive plan, and even though we may not have the money to accomplish all this yet,
You've got a plan.
we need a plan. We need a
Right.
big picture.
It
If-
is interesting that what it'll do to the elementary schools, in terms that you're kind of putting off a little bit of some of the other issues if we're only doing roofs on the elementary schools. And so in some ways that allows us to think a little bit bigger in that, would you want to, especially if you're thinking of a 20 or 30-year plan that you're asking of the superintendent and the committee, is do you then want to say, all right, all of our elementary schools right now are at least 50 years old. So if we're looking at 20 to 30 years out, now we're looking at 70 to 80 years old. So do we want to have a plan where basically we're saying we're going to replace every elementary school? And this would be how we do it. I mean, that is incredibly aggressive. I was in a district in which they did that over a series of years. They had one elementary school that they put the kids in for a temporary year, and then that year they basically went through and they did all the improvements on the other elementary school. It was very challenging, especially when it was year to year to your kids all got moved, and of course the year my kids got moved was the year that they decided the temporary building had asbestos and wasn't going to have it yet. So then they had changed plan. My point being that it does give us an opportunity to think if that's something we want to go for. Do we want to be thinking big and saying every one of our elementary schools in 30 years is going to need to be replaced. So, we're only doing the roofs now because we're going to have a whole new elementary school. And how would you do that?
And that's the purpose of why we all decided that we are going to need a long-term 30-year plan, because we have been hearing over and over again in these internal meetings, guys, we can give you ideas, but you, the district, have to come up with what you wanna do with these buildings. If we ask them to renovate them all at some point, they can be renovated. If we wanna consolidate, tear a few down because they're so close to each other or they're not in great condition and they're not, the FCI numbers are too high and they're not even worth renovating, we have to redo them all, that's another issue. But to have to kind of rush and make those decisions, it's just not feasible, and we don't have the money anyway right now. but you all have given us give a task to do, to give you all direction back. Because why are we gonna keep bandaging up these buildings for the next 10 years or 20 years if we're only gonna tear them down eventually? So I think that was kind of the point of putting a vote out there and saying, please, we're gonna task the school committee to task the superintendent to come up with an extended plan. Whether it's 20 years, 30 years, I mean, we voted on 30 years, I personally think, go as far out as possible. I also was thinking about this too. I think people have to understand, because this came up in the school committee meeting, we're not talking about a 30-year plan to talk about what are people gonna be teaching in 30 years from now. I consider it a roadmap. You're a packing list. You're going from New Jersey to California, okay? And you need to pack as much as possible to be prepared for when you get to California. You might along the way stop off in this state or that state or another state. So, you can, but ultimately have enough stuff packed, have enough stuff ready and prepared so that in 30 years from now, your buildings can handle that. Your buildings can handle what might be coming our way. We know that technology is a huge thing. AI is gonna be is a huge thing. We have to start thinking like that when we put our money into these buildings. And until we start thinking long-term, we're really just putting Band-Aids on old buildings and we're just gonna be stuck in the mud. So I just think that it's not talking about what teachers are gonna be teaching in 30 years. That's the weeds. We're talking about, are these classrooms going to be able to accommodate a different mode of teaching than in the 60s or in the 70s when we all just sat at desks and did rote memorization.
And then when we get to that point of facility A to either renovate or saying we're going to knock it down and build new, that's when you start looking at, okay, what's the teaching and learning look like at that point? And what do you need for classrooms? What goes in the classrooms? What type of classroom spaces do you need? That's when you start thinking about the teaching and learning, not planning now 30 years out with teaching. We just need a 30-year plan, whatever, or however many years of what are we going to do with our elementary schools, and start looking at each school and how much is needed and what do we want to do with each of those buildings 5 years out, 10 years out, 15 years out. And once we have a plan, especially looking at redistricting and what that may look like, we can identify, well, how many school buildings do we need? And, okay, maybe we have too many buildings on the north and we need to look and relocate and something has to go down the south and try to look at, each end of town and centralize where our elementary schools are. And what do those schools look like inside comes closer to that time of when it's actually time to do that. Now, for example, DMS, we're proposed making some changes around classroom space and how classrooms are used based on what we know teaching is right now. They didn't have robotics and technology and STEM rooms 20 years ago, but now.
But the building's flexible enough to make that
and
change.
we can make those changes within the building. So I have a question about the current CIP that we have and what we had submitted to RIDE and what's on there that we haven't talked about yet. And maybe it was talked about when I was gone.
That's why I jumped to this. I think the elementaries are probably the area where we're moving things around a little bit more.
I guess my question is around the HVAC work and what work are we still proposing within this plan?
So the normal elementary approach, we'll start with Quidnesset, is, as I mentioned, the secure entry vestibules. And in this case, since it's an open plan room, creating a walled off media center with a small group instruction room attached to it, so that there's acoustical privacy and sort of up-to-date media center. It's not a hodgepodge of temporary walls and book cards.
You're talking floor to ceiling, permanent walls.
Floor to ceiling permanent walls. In the case of Quidnesset, this building's sprinkled, these only are gonna be smoke tight. We'll have lots of glass in and out of the media center. This is a picture of one of the media centers we did in Pawtucket. It's part of the RIDE Facility Equity Initiative. And the space itself is easy to create. Without funding the furniture that's gonna go into the space, you're only tackling 40% of the problem. So what we've included in our narratives is a budget for the furniture for this space, and that's gonna be part of the push and pull with what gets priority. Maybe we can't afford to fit the whole place up, but we gotta do something to make it nice and usable. And to your question, Kenny, what we're proposing in the base scope is the roof, the accessible site roof, because there are 5-inch steps around the entire building. There's no handicap parking, we're gonna strike that, that's easy. Repainting the building is gonna be a huge improvement in order to say, hey, we did something, we brightened it up. We talked about the media center, the secure entry vestibule. This school, again, has a divider wall that doesn't operate, we're gonna replace that if money allows. And then all of those other things like the mechanical work, the cabinet unit heaters, the exhaust fan replacement, the lighting controls, that's all part of an ad alternate at the moment. Because we don't think it's gonna fit within the bond based on the enormous ask and the list that we developed at DMS for equity.
But it would be in the plans, but as alternates, so,
We'll have a price.
Yep.
They could be moved around if necessary later on, or if we find that there's a mechanism for rebates or alternative funding to enact some of this stuff, we could.
So, just looking at Quinnesset, and we had in the plan for HVAC with RTUs, recommissioning, sound attenuation, remove and replace exhaust fans, remove and replace existing cabinet unit heaters. Like, what about the end of life of these major systems in this building that we are now saying we might not be doing, and it's an ad alternate if there's enough money?
Well, again,
And
the
then something
operative
goes
term
wrong.
was stabilization. Until you figure out that, yes, we're gonna keep this for 20 years, it doesn't make sense to do all of that work, quite frankly, because you could throw it away in 5 or 10. You're gonna go out and bond for 20 or 25 years on this, I don't know what the term is gonna be, and you're gonna be paying for all of that, and the building might not even be there. So that's part of the I'm gonna say the homework relative to the elementary level that's necessary in order to know that it's safe to do these things. Cause I mentioned earlier, we don't wanna throw good money after bad, and then if we spend, I don't know, I'm just throwing out a number for our conversation, if we spend $4 million on all of that stuff, it's $4 million that you can't do in DMS. But it's on the list for now. So back to the other term, reprioritization. It didn't drop off, it's still here. It's still part of the right ask.
So is it accurate to say, Ed, that things that are on the existing CIP, the one that is in force right now, are all still there, with the exception of the permanent walls in the 3 schools?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
again, it's where it's sitting in that, at least
Right.
this preliminary list, right? So the capital improvements are kind of DPVW's attempt at, we think these things are at the top of the list that makes sense, again, with the direction that we received from the Building Advisory Committee at the last meeting for kind of more stabilization, less, gut reno at some of these schools. The ad alts round out that list with a lot of those items that were brought up previously, but again, the assessment to say, is Quinnesset a viable building in year 10, would you invest those dollars in there?
Right.
It doesn't mean that you might not also have to make some repairs and do some one-off replacements for a unit ventilator or adding in a split or something like that. So I don't think it says, yeah, you gotta pass on all that work, but I think it's also, again, taking the direction that we heard last time to say, okay, we can't do it all, how do we kind of look at everything, give it tiers of priority, and then have that be kind of the exhibit at least that goes in for the state too. So it's hard, we're trying to meet a lot of different needs and previous work and new direction too, right, all at the same time.
And one of the great examples of that, in addition to the mechanical work, is the toilet room renovations. I mean, why would you go through and renovate single toilet room, gang toilet rooms in all of these buildings if you don't know what the long term? I mean, they're functional today.
Kenny, did that answer your question?
Yes, it did.
Okay.
Yeah.
You looked a little like.
Nope, I did. I'm
Okay.
just taking some notes.
I know you haven't been here and I want you to be comfortable
Yeah,
with the
no,
CIP
I'm-
list and.
I'm asking the questions ahead of our next school
Yeah.
committee meeting and prepping for what we need to be prepared to present to the school committee on the 19th.
19. That's why we tried to put these things here, Kenny, to that point, so that, you know, maybe I missed one or two, but the intent is that it's still that.
And I think that's the theme for each of these schools, right? It's not a carbon copy, but each school has that same kind of approach, right? Security vestibule, media center reno, and I don't know if we have to go through each of them, but I think at least there's an awareness of previous list, kind of reprioritization, and then making sure that that list is comprehensive and inclusive of, you know, the previously accepted or kind of acknowledged approach, as well as the pivot with this different direction.
So hopefully it kind of reframed everything in a better format.
Indeed. Thank you.
I'm sure it's a lot of information. If you have any questions, just let me know.
Okay.
Thanks, Ed.
You're
Any
welcome.
other questions right now for Ed? Very good. Thank you so much. That was very helpful.
Can I throw some questions up to the
Fire
committee?
away.
So I'm just thinking timeline. We know we don't have a lot of time. We know that all of this work is being completed, everything has to go out to cost estimators. So everything looks wonderful right now, and we can get excited about the work we wanna talk about for DMS, additional work there, but we really don't know what we can do yet and prioritize until the cost estimates come in and we know what we can budget for. But what we can possibly say right now, looking at what was presented tonight and what has been reviewed from all prior as well, that we somewhat do have a prioritization of what can be done or needs to be done, moving forward, right? There's three buckets: the roofs, renovations to DMS, to make sure that we're looking at comparison to the new WMS, and stabilizing the elementary schools with thinking about warm and dry, security of the schools, some educational enhancements by looking at media centers. And then we have the adults that are in there that will be part of our submission to RIDE, so we get approval of it, so that way if we can do it, we know we get reimbursements on that. That, to me, sounds as though we have our kind of path in going forward. What we need to do prior to a school committee meeting is making sure this building advisory committee approves something like that to go to school committee. Because what will be asked of me at a school committee meeting, as well as the building advisory committee, looked at this updated CIP list and have they approved it. And so that needs to be done prior to August 19th, because I would like this all presented at the August 19th school committee meeting to the other three members, so they have enough time to understand this before we have to go to a meeting in September and say, okay, here's the final approval. So I'm wondering if this committee is willing to consider a motion to say this list that we now have, we are in agreement to or not in agreement to, of moving forward,
Regarding
continuing
this-
the work
This
on all of,
three-bucket new scope of work that's listed right there.
right? And that this is what will get presented to the school committee. Obviously, on the 19th, we don't have cost estimates, but this is what we presented, and once we get cost estimates, we, as the advisory committee, have to go back to that, work of moving things around to fit the budget, have the adults, and then that goes again to the school committee in September.
I mean, you could just make the motion and see how we all feel, because we could talk about it, but then we still have to vote on it.
Right.
I personally am, having been in all these meetings, I'm extremely comfortable with that decision, but I've also been privy to a lot of this information and, feel very confident in it.
Well, I'd like to make a motion that the proposed list of this revised capital improvement plan is what we submit to the school committee as a draft of the revised CIP for the stage 2.
Second.
Any discussion on that?
So I'll just say, for myself, I've only been in 2 of these buildings, so I have to trust a lot of what, the team is telling us about the conditions. I do trust it, given the age and the research I've done on the prior reports. I certainly haven't seen the last assessment of an RTU on one of the buildings, but, I trust it, you know, my professional opinion is that, I did a scan, it looks like everything from the old list is still on the list, so it's all on the table with the exception of the walls. And I do agree with the assessment, that the walls, is more difficult than it might have been initially presented. I don't know what was done in the past, but I think that's gonna be the most contentious item that is leaving the list, cause it is a real thing that family members and people can see and touch as opposed to a roof or a new BMS that a lot of these people will not ever
Nobody sees that.
experience. But I think it does open a can of worms, for lack of a better phrase, to add these walls. It's not as simple as extending a wall 6 feet to the building perimeter.
And I agree with you, I think that is going to be a discussion point with the community,
Yeah.
right? With the families at Quinnesset, Stony Lane, Fishing Grove, as well as the teaching staff.
Exactly.
Administration, well, why aren't we? We said we could. But I think with further analysis and what we're hearing from the architects from DPW, there's a lot more that needs to go into that. And then the other side is that with the redistricting and potential of bringing in a consultant now to look at, okay, what are we going to do within our district of our elementary schools, and to put together a redistricting plan, that could change a lot with how our schools are used. And if we go through and say, okay, we're not gonna build the walls, and now we've kind of locked ourselves into how those schools are used, how many classrooms are in those schools, we're kind of putting the horse before the cart of where we're going with the direction of elementary schools in our district.
I think it's also a natural progression of a building project of this size. As our budgets are refined and refined and refined, there has always been, it's always been the case that some things may not be able to be done. It was only gonna be done if we had the money to do them. And now we have our experts saying, which I'm much more comfortable with, these are the things that you should put the priorities on at this time. And even then, as the budgets become more honed down and focused, we still may not be able to do everything that they're suggesting that we do.
Right.
But it's just a roadmap for the future, so.
And I think it's important for people to know that, you know, let's say we get the cost estimates. These are complicated projects, even the simple ones, occupied buildings, phased renovations, short timelines, logistics are complicated. The cost estimates might cause some sticker shock when we get them, but it doesn't really change what we didn't do anything wrong. We still have a list, and now we just know the parameters with it, in which we can work. So I think it still, you know, makes sense to have the list the way it is. So.
Any further discussion? We have a motion on the floor to accept the revised CIP as outlined by Ed and detailed on this page in front of us. Just for the folks at home, this entire packet will be posted online within the next 48 hours.
It's already up there.
It is, thank you very much, very good, it's already up there. We're that good, nicely done. Any further discussion? Okay, now we're gonna take a vote, right?
Yeah.
That will question it. Robert's rule. All in favor of adopting the revised CIP as explained to us over the last hour and a half, vote yes.
Aye.
All in
Aye.
favor? Any opposed? There being none opposed, the motion passes.
So it's accept the proposed revised scope of work in the capital improvement plan to then be submitted to the school committee as a proposed plan moving forward.
As an approved proposal. Everybody agree with that wording? Is that wording?
Oh, it's an improved proposed.
Approved. Approved.
Building subcommittee.
It's improved too, but we're.
Building subcommittee, building advisory committee approved.
Oh, okay. But you had said something about submitting it to the school committee,
Right.
so I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah,
it was
can you,
in there.
can you read it back one more time?
So the building committee approved the proposed revised scope of work plan in the capital improvement plan to then be submitted to the school committee. I put as a proposed plan moving forward.
Proposed plan, yes.
you can fix that one, I'll send it out to you tomorrow, you can relook at
I
it.
think, grammatically we need to.
I need to
move something.
grammatically.
I
Yeah,
think
we
the
need to
word
move some
recommendation
more
needs to be
fun.
thrown in there,
More
this is
fun.
our recommendation, I feel like
okay.
that's how the advisory committees submit things to school committees, these are our recommendations, this is the recommendation. But again, you guys can figure out the wording
Yep.
specifically,
Wordsmith that.
yeah, and
That's why you approve my minutes.
make it more succinct.
Okay, very good, thank you. I think that's, gonna move our cause along briskly. Alrighty, the next item up is my resignation. I officially resign my position as, chairman of this board, due to the fact I'll be leaving employment of the school district in 7 more days.
So I'd like to jump in and I regretfully accept that and regretfully had to accept your resignation. I want to thank you on behalf of the school department for all of your hard, dedicated work. You stepped right in here during a hard time, and you did a lot for us. You got right in, you rolled up your sleeves, and you stepped into each school. You made sure everyone in this district knew who you were and what your role was. I had heard from many teachers that, wow, we know who the facility director is, and he was in our school handing us his business card, asking what can I do to help? And that is impressive. That's gonna be a loss for the school department. But I thank you, I wish you well in your future, and good luck.
Thank you,
You're welcome.
appreciate it.
I can echo what Kenny said as well. For us at Wickford Middle School, it's been a great, whatever, how many months, or this 10 months?
11.
11 months,
11 months,
it's been
1
great,
week,
and,
3 days.
done a wonderful professional job, and we've been very lucky to have you, so best of luck in all that.
Thanks, Dave, appreciate that. Next motion is, however, to install a new building advisory committee chairman. Do you have any nominations for chairman?
Can we discuss it first? Just because
Sure.
I think the decision, according to the policies that I've read, and I could be wrong, but RIDE says, here's this people to be on the committee, and they should be appointed based on the policies of the district or whatever. And then the policies that we have as a school committee is that whoever Kenny appoints from the administration would be the co-chair along with the school committee members. So I think really the decision is up to Kenny about who to appoint from the administration. I don't think it actually requires a vote. I think it's up to him who he wants to put on here. And if it's a temporary person until we get a new director of facilities or whatever, he could appoint somebody from the administration in the time being.
So,
And then they would be co-chairs with Megan and I.
yeah, so that would be my recommendations, that
Yeah.
whoever we do appoint during this time period is the interim until the new facilities director is hired. And it makes sense that the facilities director is the other co-chair of this committee. Myself and Rob are co-chairs of other committees, and not to add on more, but to really balance out. So I will go through, I think, really the only other administrators that are on this committee are Dave, Rob.
And Leslie.
Yes, but Leslie has a hard time making this time period, so it would be one or the other. So I'll have that conversation with you and Rob, and temporarily we'll have one of you choose.
Okay, so there will be no installation of a chairman at this point. We'll table that particular issue.
Thanks,
And
Matt.
if anything comes up, Megan and I can handle it in the meantime.
Yeah, it wouldn't be you, though, temporarily?
It could be, if he wants to.
Can I just make
See
a
see how that meeting goes.
Well, I know it's a lot, I mean, I know you're just coming back and all, but I'm just wondering, because I know there are a lot of decisions that need to be made fairly quickly, in terms, even like with agendas, and so I'm just wondering, if it might just be more efficient to have you as the.
I have no problem doing it temporarily, because I'm at all the meetings, I'm
Yeah.
at all the Thursday meetings, I'm be on all the phone calls with the vendors, so I have no problem doing that and being that person in the interim.
And then if he wants to have a conversation with Dave or whoever,
Yeah.
in the meantime, we can have another interim until we get that person,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's not a bad idea.
Do we have to,
Okay.
do we have to put that in, or you?
No, cause you said he just has
Right.
to nominate
He
himself
just-
or
it
make
should be-
himself.
Yeah, he can just make himself the interim for the time, the interim for the time.
So
being.
why don't we just do that? I will be the interim
Thank you, yeah.
co-chair until we hire a new facilities director. Keep us moving.
Okay.
So you want me to write it as co-chair?
No, you're like the official chair, right, Rob?
No, it's supposed to, according to
It's
the
a-
policies,
it's
it's a
like-
co-chair.
Co-chair.
The, whoever the
Tri-chairs.
administration person and the school committee people, they are co-chairs of the committee.
Okay, we're good on that one, then, right? No vote necessary, just discussion and agreement to move forward in that regard. Okay, very good. Just a quick note, in the coming week, Rob, I'm gonna reach out to you and Megan, maybe we can meet briefly, setting our meeting agenda for the rest of the year. Now we know what the town council dates are, we know what the school committee meetings are. Wanna see how we can dovetail our meetings in to complement those meetings. Okay, we'll, pick out some dates, maybe look at, what's out there.
Yeah, one thing that jumped out at me when Erica was talking was that there is the commissioning agent RFP that was coming back, and they were gonna be making a decision, I believe, August 15th.
Yeah, I gave
They're due
Sam.
back, I'm sorry, the RFPs are due back the 15th, the decision we made shortly thereafter.
So we don't necessarily, as a school committee, like, is it time sensitive where we would have to vote on it by August 19th?
I don't think so.
It's
Okay.
not.
I think we
The
have.
commissioning agent is a long-term, vendor.
I do know
Isn't
that,
it-
but they did say
I think it's a
something.
ride requirement though.
You need to have
Yeah.
them engaged
It is.
before the submission.
That's what I was
That's
asking.
what I think,
Yes.
it has to be on board before.
Before September.
Before-
Before
September
I don't
15th.
wanna quote me, but I remember looking at this, cause commissioning is, now they all have to be on board before, in the project infancy.
So it's a stage 2 item.
So I'm asking because we have an August 19th
If
meeting.
it doesn't happen, as long as there's an explanation.
Okay, but we also have a September 9th meeting,
We
Right.
do.
so we could do
But-
it.
But then the town council meeting isn't until 2 weeks later, so the town council meeting will be after the 15th. But as long as we've done this before, right, and they accepted it,
School
Okay.
committee
we
vote.
put in a memo in there saying, here's the timeline of the approval. We have someone, we're just waiting on the approval of that person.
Cause I was thinking backwards, like, then we also need the building subcommittee, I guess, approval recommendation, or approval first. And if we needed it by the 19th,
And if we
then
need to,
we'd have to
we
meet
can do
earlier.
that with the smaller group that was
Okay.
formed. Because that's why we said, having that smaller group, because some of these decisions have to happen quickly.
Right, right.
And-
Core group, maybe
Yeah,
over.
that
Yeah.
core group, right, that Thursday group,
Mhm.
right? Okay. So we can do it that way. The other thing I mentioned to Sam is that when we look at these dates, we might want to really look ahead and plan 2 weeks earlier of having everything done, because town council meets on the Monday, school committee meets on the Tuesday.
Yeah.
So can we get it done 2 weeks earlier at the prior school committee meeting? So then it's going to town council on more of a timeline we need versus it going later.
Gotcha.
Right.
It's
Get
just
in
kind of
front of that.
flipping,
Get in front of that
Right.
flip-flop meeting.
it's just because of the way the dates fall.
Gotcha.
Right. Okay, sounds good.
All right. Yeah, good luck with that. No, I'm kidding.
I think we should schedule a meeting on August 15th.
I think.
How about
I might-
that?
I might
8
be
a.m.
sick for that day.
Wow.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Oh.
Any opposed?
Wait, and you are again?
Robert.
Robert.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Good
and
job.
Chris, it's been a pleasure even though it's been short.
Yeah, short and sweet. Thank you.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Well, I mean, I'll see you on the toy, but, it's not in person.
Yeah, worry about it.
Thank you.
Best of luck. You're welcome.